Good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you.
You guys shared with me. This is going to be for folks listening. We're putting this out on January 9th.
Yes.
Why is January 9th significant?
Yeah, so January 9th is the start of the public scoping period for our Rock Creek project, which means that it's the first time that the golf course plans are released to the public, and the end goal of that is to have like a comment period where we can solicit just general thoughts and critiques or positive comments from the public, which then get wrapped into kind of the larger environmental assessment process that will eventually lead to us starting this construction project here.
So you shared with me, or the National Links Trust team shared with me, an extensive document. This is essentially the design proposal that you submitted to the National Park Service.
Yes.
There's a couple exciting things. We're gonna get into it. There's all sorts of different aspects of it I want to kind of get into, but let's get the one kind of maybe the biggest thing that people want to know about right out of the gate. And there are some. I know everything can change. There's a lot of unknowns, but there are some hard timelines in there, or at least estimated timelines.
Yeah.
Do you know those off the top of your head?
Yeah, I know them off the top of my head. And I also know that a timeline is useful on one level and also is, subject to
but
change.
There's in the document, there's an expected year and season of when this whole thing could be done.
So the general timeline is that we would like to be finished with the compliance process in the summer and break ground in the fall. That's probably, just knowing how these things work, the best possible timeline that we could get
of this year.
Of this year.
And this is, but when you're talking construction, you're talking clubhouse range.
Right. So there's two phases to the project, basically.
Okay.
That we would break ground on phase one, which includes the clubhouse, the driving range. There's a cart barn building that's part of that whole complex, the maintenance facility, the greens that are around the clubhouse, including the big putting green out front. Those are the big components of phase one. That would allow us to have the golf course to continue to operate while the construction of the clubhouse and surrounds happens. So we'd still have 9 holes of the golf course open during that time. And then about a year later, when the clubhouse and driving range open, we would shut down the golf course and start the golf course renovation work. And that would be about a year. And then we'd be fully open 2 years from this fall. That would be the goal.
So the goal right now is the fall of 2025. This whole thing is done.
Yeah, with the range opening in the fall of 2024. So you'd have something big before that.
Got it. So we've talked about it a little bit on some other podcasts. You've talked about it on some other podcasts. A lot of people will know the general idea of the concept of what's happening here. Today, for the longest time, since essentially 1925 or 1926, it's been an 18-hole golf course. The previous leaseholders, 2015, 2016, had to shut down the back 9 because maintenance was too much and overgrowth and flooding and that sort of thing. So it's really only been a 9-hole course until National Links Trust reopened 5 of those holes in the back 9.
Yeah, that's right.
But it hasn't been a full 18-hole course in 6 or 7 years.
Yeah, exactly. And the original design of the course by William Flynn, one of the great architects of the golden age era of golf course design. That course was changed dramatically in the 50s when Military Road was built. They cut off 3 of the holes of the original course. And then, so into the space of the remaining front 9, so the 3 holes that were cut off were the 3rd, 4th, and 5th. And so in the space of the rest of the front 9, they chopped up some par 4s and smashed in 3 holes into what was 6 holes before. Yeah. So that's why kind of the front 9 is and still is this like weird mishmash of like some really good holes that look like they've been there for a long time, and then some 200-yard uphill par 3s to postage stamp greens that are impossible. And it's like the course is really really short. Yeah. But it doesn't cater to beginners. It's really difficult at the same time.
Right. Right. Which doesn't make a lot of sense.
No.
But yeah,
it's a tweener. Yeah.
What's cool about this design proposal, I don't think I'm not sure I'd ever even seen really a proper routing and aerial of the original 18 by William Flynn. But not only is it in the proposal, so you can really see the parts of 3, 4, and 5, or the original holes 3, 4, and 5 that were chopped off to expand Military Road.
Yep.
But you've got essentially all 3 routings right next to each other. So you've got
Yep.
William Flynn's original 18, you've got what it's looked like for the past 60, 70 years,
Yep.
and you've got your proposal, which you can really see all 3 of them together.
Yep.
Which is cool. And I'm not sure I've ever seen that. So you can really see how you laid this out.
Yeah, I
and
think,
what makes sense.
since these documents will be public, as of the publication of this podcast, I think it's worth taking a look at that document, right? And which includes the diagram that you're referring to, and it's a cool layout of the history of the site and how we arrived at our plans and what the plans include.
Yeah. So some of those plans include, so if you've been out here on this course before, there's no driving range here. And I'm sure as the leaseholders now and seeing all the numbers, certainly down at East Potomac, that driving ranges bring in a lot of revenue.
Yes, driving ranges are great for the business of these courses, and really as it works now, the East Potomac driving range drives a lot of what makes the economics of our operation possible. So, as we looked at this, the East Potomac range is really accessible to Virginia, but a lot less accessible to Maryland and upper Northwest DC, and we see this as an opportunity to bring what makes East Potomac really a great resource to golfers, to be something that's a lot more accessible to more of the area.
So was ensuring that source of revenue and creating room for a driving range, was that like from the get-go, this has got to be part of the
plan? Yeah, I mean, this golf course has always lost money, or at least in the history of the economics that we've seen. And so one of the first problems to solve is, do we think that we can turn that around and make a business that isn't, that's additive and not something that's going to lose money, especially since, we're being asked to invest a lot of money in the property, right? So if we're going to spend a lot of money, it would be helpful to know that what we end up with is going to be something that works from a business perspective.
Sure.
So that's probably starting point number one, is just how do we build a good business out of this? The starting point number two, though, is that we can't get back the original William Flynn design, right? You can't, with Military Road going through that area, you can't restore something here in the same way that you can restore the Walter Travis course at East Potomac. So while there's a really great design history, we can't go back to the full-on original design. Mm-hmm. And so we're left with something like 15 holes, right, of original William Flynn holes. And not only that, we've got the back nine, which is severely compromised by overgrowth of trees, and we're working with the National Park Service, where there's this push and pull between a restoration of design versus the natural environment. And so we've got to come up with a balance that we think we can make work given all of those factors.
So we're talking about the back nine, and we're saying that some of it is not necessarily as usable. In the plans, you created an irrigation pond.
Yeah.
And parts of the only really part of the golf course that has been in use for the majority of the past 70 years that isn't in the new plans as golf course would be holes 12 and 13, which kind of on the far northwest corner of the property, where there's water issues, there's a lot of overgrowth.
Yeah.
So is the idea to create an irrigation pond to get a lot of the, I don't know a ton about irrigation either.
Yeah.
Is it to get a lot of the rainwater just to drain over to that irrigation pond
so
to then reuse?
The golf course right now uses city water, which is not a great situation. Mm-hmm. What we'd like to do is capture rainwater in the irrigation pond, and that way we can be using what falls naturally on the site to irrigate the golf course instead of city water. We're not totally sure if that's going to meet 100% of our needs, but if it meets 80% of our needs and we have to supplement with 20% from somewhere else, that's a lot better than 100% city water. So that's number one. Number two, that area up there, we looked at what it would take to get enough sunlight to grow grass on 12 and 13, and it would basically require cutting down most of a multi-acre forest. And it was just, when you're kind of weighing what we should propose and what we should not propose, that seemed like an area where it's going to be really difficult to get everybody on the same page about what it would take to create good growing conditions for grass up there.
And I would imagine that piece specifically, taking down trees, golf course aficionados, certainly like golden age architecture aficionados, they're all about getting rid of trees.
Right.
But I imagine the National Park Service not so much.
I mean, I think that there's a balance, right? It's the same balance. I think they deal with this, like imagine a Civil War battlefield or something like that, where when the battle was fought, there were, farms in the area, no trees. And then over time, the situation changes. There's more trees or a forest where the battle was fought.
Right.
And then the Park Service has to make a decision, okay, well, if we're going to make this space available to the public, we want it to represent what it represented at the time. So they've got to decide, like, well, do we restore, like, the conditions when that battle occurred, or do we, interpret it in some other way? And a lot of those places you can go and visit, they've restored the open fields where the battles occurred so they can, show people what that might have looked like on the ground. Here at a golf course, I feel like the Park Service is pretty well versed in understanding that, yeah, there's a period of historic significance that if you're going to say that the golf course design is of importance, and we're on the National Register of Historic Places here, and so there's an acknowledgement that you need to restore the landscape as part of that. So there is some definite movement towards, or acceptance of, there needs to be some tree work done. At the same time, conditions have changed a lot. Like the forest that the back nine was cut through in 1927 is now 100 years older. And the trees are massive, much, much bigger than they were when the golf course was built. And the amount of clearing that would be required to, bring back the turf conditions actually probably goes further than what would be necessary to, restore the corridors of the original holes. So there's a little bit of like a push and pull there. So it's, I think that Park Service is open to these conversations,
right,
but it's also not like black and white. You can do whatever you need to do in order to make it happen. And I think what we're trying to do is strike that balance and say, like, yeah, we can't restore the entire golf course anyway. Mm-hmm. So we can get 9 really great original holes back, and then can we use the remaining corridors to build something really good, utilizing as much of that Flynn design as possible too. And then that's where the leftover 12th and 13th holes come into play, and well, can we do something that'd be really great for the community in those places? And that's what we hit on.
Got it. And so the result proposal is you got the driving range. We're gonna have an updated clubhouse, which we'll get into, but we're gonna have, like you mentioned, a 9-hole course where you get as close as possible as restoring 9 William Flynn holes, not his original 1 through 9 necessarily, but 9 of his 18 holes, and then a 9-hole short course, kind of on a bunch of that property that was used for the back 9 before. Yeah. Well, again, what's cool about this proposal and looking at the routings, the overheads from all 3 phases, you can really see, okay, now I get it. And I can go through them real quick, which I'm sure you know off the top of your head, but I could for the first time I could see them. It's like, okay, well, 1 is essentially the same. One is the same. One's never really changed.
Yep.
2, so this is the big change right here. Is like you said, since Military Road, the expansion of Military Road took this portion of land of the course. Yep. A lot for Flynn's design. That's where 2, 3, 4, and 5 all were. Yep. Since in the last 70 years, that's been 2 and 3. Yep. And in your proposal, that's going to be a nice, solid, full-length par 4. Yeah. That'll get
to the 3rd green.
Pretty close to. That's is that kind of like his original?
So like
hole?
So the second hole, the original second hole, played to a different green than is currently in play right now. It was a little bit shorter and a little bit closer to the parking lot. and then you would walk backwards and play the third hole into the forest, and then back from there up to the current third green. So the current third green is the original green in that area. Does that make sense to you?
It does. So,
Yeah.
so the current third green, was that the original?
That was the original fourth green.
Original fourth green.
Yep.
And basically in that area will be the future 2 green?
Yeah, so we're just, our proposal is to play from the second tee to the fourth, to the, the current third green,
Right.
original fourth green. But that's kind of an original Flynn green that we can rebuild in its place and create a really good par 4 out of it.
Got
that
it.
like has most of the elements of the original second hole in, basically.
Well, that's why it's cool to look at this document. So anybody can kind of look it up, and you might have to zoom in a bit.
Yeah,
or if you're like
yeah.
me and you had to print it and borrow your kid's magnifying glass to kind of see all these angles, then you can do that. But moving on, and so he didn't jump across the road there, the road that comes up to the parking lot in the clubhouse,
Yep.
until the 6th hole. But his 6th hole will be the future 3rd hole, and that looks like maybe not exact, but pretty darn close.
Right, so the original course played across the creek
Oh, it
after,
did?
yeah, so it
Was there not a
played
road
from,
there?
So there was no road there. That Joyce Road, which is the name of that road, that goes down, parallels Military Road. That is, that's relatively new. So the original par 3 played across the creek and down the hill from, what's the current third green, and then you played the, you're right. It would be the 6th hole at that time. From down around that space, down by the creek.
Got it. So was there, was there a different road back then to get into the property?
Yeah, so you actually came down this farm road here. And so that road, so this was an old farm. The farm road still exists to get into it, and you would come off of, I forget the name of the road up in the neighborhood, but you'd come from the neighborhood in on the farm road to the clubhouse.
Would that be Underwood Street?
Underwood.
Because
yeah.
I noted Underwood because also now I'm jumping around a little bit, but in your plans, so Underwood Street and some of the houses right there, it's a dead-end street right off 16th Street, northwest here in DC. Currently is the green for the 8th green.
Yeah.
In the future, and your proposal will be, now I'm getting confused.
It's got to be 5.
It's the 5th.
Yeah,
is the 5th green of the proposal. But in your proposal, you're saying you might bring that road back, or there might be an entrance up there.
Well, an entrance for like hiking paths.
Oh, okay,
right.
Got it.
So yeah, you'd have. So we have that 12th and 13th hole corridor area, which we're going to naturalize with pollinator meadows and hiking trails, and so. It would make for really good bird habitat. And the golf course, is already used informally by birders a lot because it's got a ton of edge habitat. Like an edge habitat is basically like the space on the edge of a forest where there's a lot of, ability. I'm not a bird expert really, but I do know that like being on the edge of a forest is where a lot of animals live because you've got that intersection of open and enclosed space, which makes it attractive for a tons of different types of animals. And birds in particular love those spaces, and it makes for a great place for viewing too, because you can be in the open and observing, a lot of space as you look for birds. So I know that, like, the golf course is used for that a lot. We want to lean into that and make the space available to birders in a more formal way than it is now. So that 12th and 13th hole space is really good, opportunity for that. But the entrance from Underwood would be one of several ways to get to that,
Right.
Area of the property, including there'll be paths from the clubhouse, which one of the paths would be going down that old farm road, which goes currently between the 8th and 9th holes.
So that's cool. So that kind of eco trail, that walking path, that'll essentially run the entire property, or
Yeah, I mean,
it's laid out in the design. But
Yeah, it's like mostly in the back 9 forested areas, but there is a big loop you can do starting from the clubhouse and ending at the clubhouse.
Cool.
The one change that is slightly different from what you were describing is that the third tee will be close to the current 6th green. So instead of walking all the way down to where the current 4th tee is, down by the entrance road, you're actually going to tee off from pretty close to the 6th green. So you're just going to kind of walk across the road, the entrance road,
Yep.
and play your tee shot, which would go down into the current, kind of towards the current 4th green, and then play up to the 5th green site.
Got it.
That is one reason we're doing that is to shorten the walk. The other is to carve out a bit of space for the future maintenance building, which will go basically where the current 4th tee is.
Okay, and then the routing kind of changes from there, right?
Right.
Because now you're kind of going into, you're using a few of the holes from the
Almost,
back nine.
yeah. So you go to the 5th green on our proposed 3rd hole, and then you play the current 6th hole like it is as the 4th hole, and then we combine the current 7th and 8th holes into our 5th. Right, that plays to the 8th green.
That looks like a pretty
That's
long,
that's like a long par 4. It was always a long par 4.
Okay.
It's kind of on the edge of par 5 length. It's a really great hole. That was an original Flynn hole. This the current 6th hole is the original Flynn hole. So then after you get to the 8th green, again our 5th green, you go to play the 11th hole as our 6th.
Right.
That's again an original Flynn. It actually was part of the 9 holes that were first built on property before it all got reconfigured by Flynn in 1927.
Okay.
Then you play from there a par 5 down the current. The hole numbers have changed a bunch, but it's basically the original 16th hole corridor, and so it's a par 5 through the woods, down the hill. Into the current 16th green site. Mm-hmm. And then you play the 17th hole and the 18th hole as
kind of as is.
8 and 9 as is. Yeah.
As 8 and 9, got it. Because the existing 15th hole kind of gets swallowed up by the range along with 10?
No, so the range is basically 9 and 10, right?
Okay.
So like from my perspective, like as a design nerd, losing the 9th hole is the real, that it's such a good hole. It's a great, field coming down that hill to the green site by the clubhouse. It's a great spot. The good news is, right, that's where the range is going with 9 and 10. You've got this big bowl to play into. It's, really, it's a long, big space, so you can, play. It's 290 yards to the top of the hill from the bottom of the range. So it's, it's a really great, natural space for it. And so you will get to kind of experience that area as part of the driving range. But, the golf hole that we're losing, it stinks to lose a good golf hole. So, but at the same time, I've looked at all the options for where a range could go, and this is really the only viable one. So,
and on the plan is the clubhouse, which is going to be connected to the range. It's not going to be exactly in the same spot. Is it kind of going to be where 9 green currently is?
No, I mean, so 9 green will still be part of the golf course. That's almost where the 18th green. 18th green is going to shift towards the 9th green.
Okay.
Up the hill a little bit.
Lengthen a little bit.
But no, it basically, the new clubhouse isn't in the same place as the old clubhouse. It shifted slightly and rotated slightly. Mm-hmm. And then it connects to the driving range. So the way it kind of fits in the area is, not really related to the current clubhouse, but it is kind of generally in the same area and generally set up the same, where you walk in on the top level of the clubhouse, but can walk out on a bottom level. So it's 2 stories in the same way the current one is.
So a lot of that decision making. So the architecture firm that is the firm of record going forward on this is Gil Hance.
Yep.
Were a lot of those decisions on the routing of the main 9, and that question will also apply to the short course, the second 9. Was that all him and his team, or were you involved in that because of, your golf course architecture background?
Yeah, so we did it with Gil, basically. Okay. I mean, we have spent a ton of time on the site and definitely had ideas about, what could be possible. And so we just kind of ran through what we thought the universe of ideas were with Gil and arrived at this as the plan.
Got it. Can you let's talk about the short course a little bit and what those holes will look like?
Yeah, so the short course uses the back 9 space, for the most part. And what I think is really cool about the way the routing works generally is like everything starts right by the clubhouse in close proximity. So you'll have the first tees and the ninth greens of both courses right here. And then the back nine is obviously in the more forested area. So the par 3 course moves kind of out towards what will be our, the current 17th tee, our 8th tee. And then plays through the 15th and 14th hole corridors and loops back to the clubhouse. So, you can kind of think of it as using the corridors that exist, and each golf hole is about half the size of the full corridor, so you get 2 holes per corridor going through it.
So are the par 3s the ballpark lengths of some of those holes? Or
I think it's like max 120 yards. The idea is that we want it to be something that's really approachable, and that for a good player they can take a few clubs out and play. But for a beginner, it's like family friendly. For a beginner or junior, it's a really great place to start. So it's like going to be in the vein of Gil obviously built the Cradle at Pinehurst, or that's at Sand Valley they've got Sandbox, and something like that where it's meant to be really approachable for any golfer, but it's also really fun for good golfers and just provides a venue for groups of any type to go out and enjoy.
I didn't ask. So on the main 9, or I'm not sure how to refer to it, but the larger 9.
Yeah.
What is the approximate yardage, and what's the par on that?
I think it's looking at something like 33 to 3,400 yards.
Okay.
Par 35.
Par 35. Okay. For those that aren't familiar or maybe never played a Gil Hanse course, like what can the golfer expect? In the finished product he's world-renowned.
Yeah, Gil's also really well known for, golf course renovations, right? Like bringing back architecture that's been lost by some of the best architects. Like he just renovated Winged Foot, or the Country Club, or all of these places, right? So Gil's really good at putting himself in the shoes of the original designer, like studying what available materials there are and bringing back kind of the character of courses that might have been lost. And that's really like our situation here. Is he's going to be bringing back the Flynn, golf course. And there's a few spots where we'll be building something, that's not totally original to Flynn, but will be, in that same vein. So like, I think we couldn't have a better architect for this particular type of project.
I think it's fair to say, I'm not a Gil Hanse aficionado. I've played a couple of his courses, not a ton, but from my own knowledge of him and modern golf course architecture and what he's done, the average retail golfer out here that isn't familiar with him, this place is gonna look
it's gonna be awesome.
Totally different. It's gonna be incredible.
Yeah, it's gonna be amazing. I think like if you're thinking about like Gil as an architect and where his actual where his personality will come through as opposed to channeling Flynn, right? That's the par 3 course where Gil's really well known for, I would say, like fun courses with contour, but again that feature a lot of fairway, a lot of obviously what he builds is beautiful. So, and we have a beautiful setting here, so it's something that is right off the bat got all the ingredients to be really special. But then you add in like Gil's expertise as just one of the best golf architects of all time. It's going to be really great.
Let's talk a little bit about the clubhouse. So the clubhouse here, another cool thing in this design proposal is you've got this historical timeline going all the way back to like natives. I can't remember how far it goes back, but like BC type stuff. Of what's been happening throughout centuries on this property. But early 20th century, after the golf course opened, there were 2 fires here at this clubhouse. And so the original clubhouse was like an old farmhouse?
Yeah, so there was a farm here. Basically, all of the open space around the clubhouse where most of the front line resides, as well as like 10 and 18, that was the space of the original farm. There was an even older farm in the space of 12 and 13, which are now completely forested. So it's even hard to believe that some of that used to exist out here. But yeah, the area was heavily farmed the farmhouse on this parcel where we're sitting was the original clubhouse for the golf course, and was that way until the 40s, I believe, when it burned down. And then there was a whole process to like design, or maybe even after the 40s, I mean the 50s. And when it burned down, there was a process to design a new clubhouse, which I think got design engineered into oblivion, and they ended up with what we have now.
So the proposed clubhouse, the new clubhouse, what was that process like? Because I imagine that's its own kind of...
So we've evolved a little bit on that one. You know, we started with the idea that a farmhouse style was appropriate because of the old farm that was here. You know, we have a couple components to the overall clubhouse, you know, kind of setup. We have the main clubhouse, which houses like the pro shop and a restaurant and some office space for the First Tee of Greater Washington, and some meeting space. So like, that's the main clubhouse. Then we have the driving range, which connects to that. And then we have what we call the cart barn, because it stores carts on the lower level, and then on the upper level has, you know, an indoor space, which would have kind of an indoor putting green for First Tee programming, but then also could be used for, you know, events and other things at times when the First Tee's not using it. And that would host that would have some of the driving range inside of it too.
So as an aside, I want to keep talking about the clubhouse, but you did bring up, and I want to make sure I don't forget to.
Yeah.
This is, am I correct? The First Tee of Greater Washington D.C. This is essentially going to be their new headquarters.
Yeah, that is the plan. Yeah,
that's exciting.
It's really exciting.
Their existing headquarters, I don't even think they're there anymore, but it was until the last couple of years. It was kind of in a basement.
Right. It is. Just a disaster of a space. So yeah, this hopefully will be, you know, we're really excited about it, and I think will be, you know, really great for the First Tee and allow for a whole bunch of programming here, which currently can't exist because there's no infrastructure for it. But.
So the clubhouse itself, it's going to have, you know, food and beverage.
Yep.
It looks like it's going to have a bar.
Yep. We want to bring in as many different reasons for, you know, golfers and non-golfers to come out here as we can. And obviously, like, the food and beverage is an opportunity. You know, what we have is just like incredible, beautiful, open setting in the middle of the city where it feels like you're, you know, miles from like anything urban. And it's still extremely close to where so many people live or commute to work. And so we've got this opportunity to bring people here and have some food, you know, and be outside, bring their families, let their kids run around.
Absolutely. So, especially if you're going to build a kind of an access point up on
absolutely.
that little neighborhood there.
Yeah.
There's probably more people. I mean, certainly more people living close to the golf course, probably than Langston and East Potomac, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, like, nobody really lives around East Potomac. I guess at the wharf now.
The new wharf.
Langston does have, you know, a pretty substantial neighborhood around it. So it might be pretty close between the two, but
only on the west side, though.
Right. Yeah. But same here. I mean, you got the park on the on one side here. But yeah, like, we want something that's informal and approachable and a place where people can be outside, you know, with their families and or, you know, pick up food after or before you're around or while you're hitting balls or whatever. But like, the idea is, we want an F&B operation, but you know, we don't want it to be kind of that like formal restaurant type of deal. Sure. We want it to be something that like, you know, you can do anything from have a beer while you're doing the putting course to, you know, sitting down for something good, but you know, approachable.
Sure. That's exciting because that's what this has lacked forever.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, it literally has none of that right now, and it's hard to believe, especially for a place that's so beautiful.
And that's a big piece. I know that National Trust has talked a lot about, you know, bringing the community in, and that, you know, I think one of the phrases that's used in the proposal is non-golfer utilization.
Yeah.
And so with the eco trail, with decent food and beverage, especially this close to a neighborhood, to get some of those folks in, I like that as a golfer. You know, I love the concept of, and you see it at so few courses, and when you come in after your round, as opposed to like the only people at the bar or the only people at the restaurant, or just the group that finished right in front of you,
absolutely.
to actually have like other people there to make so it just feels more of a lively scene.
I think one of the coolest things here is going to be just the buzz around the clubhouse for whatever you're doing, right? Like there's going to be action. If you're playing up the ninth hole on the par 3 course, the ninth hole on the big course, you're going to be coming to the clubhouse. There's going to be people at the driving range. There's going to be people sitting outside and eating, people at the putting green, and you'll feel, especially the way it's set up, like you're playing into this big amphitheater of action. And I think that always, can be a really great asset to a golf course where it feels like people are kind of, around and maybe watching you, and it makes you like excited to, hit a putt or, make a putt on the last hole, and people see it happen.
One of the things I forgot to ask, I saw in the proposal, in the design proposal is some sort of like a pavilion.
Yeah.
Which I guess would be near the first tee.
It's kind of like to the left of the first tee.
Is that for like educational programs, or where my head went with? I was like, are we doing concerts? Like what?
So, our idea is it's just a place that is open air, under roof, that the community can use for picnics or or various events, or it could be reserved, I guess, like for somebody wanted to have an event out here. But mostly it's just a great view and a great spot that's not used by the the golf course. And if we were in a different world, like it could be a great clubhouse location. We're just like, well, what can we do here that would get people into the spot?
I did see that National Youth Trust announced there's some volunteer days coming out here. So if anybody listening to this that is in the area, and you want to kind of apply what you're looking at or what you're listening to, you can come out and kind of help out the cause and walk the property and kind of apply what you're hearing to what you see.
And that's one of the things that like we haven't talked about, but the forest isn't particularly healthy here. This edge habitat, which is a great opportunity for the birders and for our ability to get people out and experiencing the more the non-golf course part of the site. It's just like the edges of the forests are overgrown with vines and invasive plants, and that's not a sign of a healthy forest.
Right.
And so the volunteer days are helping to kind of address that by removing the vines and helping to reopen the forest to healthy tree and plant growth.
Just reading the proposal gets you excited, and anybody that has any negative thoughts or doesn't love what they've heard so far, take a look at the proposal, do some research on certainly on Gil Hanse and what he's built, and I'd hope it would change your mind. I do have to ask two questions, just almost unrelated to Rock Creek, one sort of, but does the proposed timeline, does this impact? I know a lot of people, all they care about is timelines. When are all 3 courses be done? But is this based on what's proposed here, and we're looking at the fall of 2025, does that change anything as far as timelines for Langston and East Potomac?
Not really. I mean, what we've learned is that these processes are, long and involved. So like they take a bit longer than just being able to say like, yeah, we took over the golf courses in 2020 and we should be able to break ground, right away. Like obviously we're 2+ years later, and we're still in the process. Right. So, but we're doing the Langston and East Potomac compliance processes at the same time. So, our goal is to basically roll from one project to the next. So, finish both phases here, move on to the first phase at Langston. That would be the goal. So.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. This has been great. Good luck with your meeting here, and congratulations on getting this far. And I'm excited.
Thanks, Alex.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.